stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rotten about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And they got away.
You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal.
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact that we're all up in your face. It is time once again for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it. Welcome to it. Welcome to it. Few weeks off for the old Protonic. I was playing with Conan Neutron's Secret Friends, which is a thing that I also do. So apologies for the lack of episodes, but also no apologies whatsoever because the podcast was put together in service of when I am not doing that, and I'm just not apologizing for it. But those shows are great. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. I love hearing from all the fans in the various cities and the various areas that enjoy the show. And it was a good time. It's a good tour. If you haven't seen McCluskey in this tour, you really need to. I can't put any more succinctly than that. That's, of course, who we were honored enough to be tour mates for. But we are not talking about any of that. We are at the home of the Protonic Reversal. Tonight we're going to be talking about a gentleman, we'll talk to him. We're not going to talk about him, that does Emerald Circuits. If you're into gear, maybe you know from that. He has mastering, but most of all, you know from Bronson Arm. Or if not, you should. And I'm a fan of that band. They have a great recent-ish record, and I'm looking forward to talking to him about that, and that's going to be Blake in a minute. But before we do any of that, welcome to Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. I'm your host, Conan Neutron. I'm a rock and roll lifer that's been touring and recording for 24 years, most known for the band Conan Neutron, the Secret Friends. Music is a huge part of my life, and I use the format of this very long-running podcast to talk about music with musicians whose work I enjoy and respect, but who may not be household names. This is episode 378. If this is your first time listening to the show, archives of it are available for free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding, at protonicreversal.com. However, if you want to support the show and get episodes sooner, $1 a month at patreon.com/protonicreversal will achieve that goal. If you like the show or even just a single episode, please feel free to like, subscribe on your platform of choice, share it around the internet, and even leave a review. All that helps people discover the show. It beats back the almighty algorithmic overlords, and it's just a darn nice thing to do. So there you go. Bronson Arm. If you pay attention to the world of noisy rock, and if you're listening to this, chances are you probably do, then you might have heard of a certain self-titled record that came out, gosh, not even that long ago, like 2 months ago, by some fellas, Blake and Garrett, and it's called Bronson Arm, and they're great, and that's who we're talking to. We're going to be talking to Blake right now. Blake, welcome to the show, man. Appreciate you.
Hey, how's it going?
You're still the toddler stage of this release. Like it's
totally.
It's like walking around, but not really achieving sentience yet. Yeah.
Yeah, very fresh.
How long of a process was it for this record? Because I think part of it was arrested by COVID, if you will, right? Like when you first got it together.
Yeah.
Tell me the origin.
I mean, we're a fresh band as well as
a newer band as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which,
so we
guess we can start there. Sure.
started writing material. And right when we got kind of enough material together to play a set. We went out and played a show. And then like a week later, it was, pandemic shutdown. So
Right.
we it was like we were just starting to pick,
Just starting to get it
be like
together.
a
Just
band.
yeah, just exactly.
And we decided to just keep doing what we could do in that shutdown time by recording material, and then we started making videos and just anything we could do to feel productive and moving forward without playing out.
Right.
And then at a certain point, it's all a blur, but it feels like a year and a half, maybe later. We'd amassed material and things we'd just been sitting on, and things were starting to open up, and we were like, well, let's put out some singles just so people know we exist. And then we had a lot of fun doing that, and played out as much as we could while we were, continuing to record what we'd already written.
Right.
And then when the opportunity arose to work with Learning Curve Records, we just kind of amassed that body of work together, because it just felt right, because it was it was written all at the same time, basically.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm partial. That's a great label.
Yeah.
Well, I remember seeing you guys at the first Caterwaul that actually landed, not the one that was canceled, of course, and it just being a pleasant surprise. Like, it was like, oh, this is the band that's touring with Bedtime Magic. Okay, cool. And I was like, that's an interesting band name. Let's see what these guys are about. But it was, definitely seemed. I was surprised to have learned that ultimately, as a band, you hadn't done that much yet, because it seemed very fully formed. But I guess that's because you had the time to gestate, if you will, when nothing else was possible, right?
Yeah, even if it was just Garrett and I in my basement, we definitely, we enjoy just, even if it's just a practice, it's just fun. So I want to say that performance at the first Caterwaul, I want to say we maybe had 12, 15 shows under our belt at that time.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it was really fresh.
Really fresh.
As a live act, obviously.
But yeah, that was a fantastic opportunity, and just
yeah, it could do worse.
Experience. Oh, yeah. It was hilarious, because
you could do worse than playing to your natural crowd, right?
we were aware of Caterwaul, and I think had at the time we were doing submissions and stuff, and we sent off an email, and you all got back, and a nice positive response, which I wasn't even expecting. But I remember Nick from Bedtime Magic, we were putting together a little run of shows, and they were like, but you guys should, as part of the run we're doing together at the end, we're going up to do the Caterwaul thing, and you guys should reach out to him. And I was like, yeah, we already did. They're fully booked.
Yeah.
And he was like, let me talk to my people. Don't worry about it.
I know a guy. I got a guy.
I know a guy. And then, like a week later, he's like, and this was still months before the festival, but
sure.
He's like, I got it. You guys are on. And I was like, really? But, it was just one of those things that I was like, I'm going along for the ride. We're going to have a blast.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not banking on it actually happening. I don't believe it till I see it, like on promotional material, which I don't feel that I saw until like a week before, so it was, you know, we were
I just remember
preparing
thinking
ourselves like it was going to happen, but it was, you know,
sure. I mean, there was a lot. There was a lot of trying to land the plane there that had nothing to do with any of that. But I remember the first thing being like, another band that starts with the letter B, huh? Like that was like my first note, and I was like, oh, it's an interesting name, you know, like. It was like, oh, that sounds cool. Yeah, you know. I didn't realize also whatever you sent, it was pretty full sounding. I was like shocked that it was a 2-piece too. That's the other thing.
yeah, I mean,
in a good way.
good. Yeah, I mean, the last few projects that I've been involved with were 2-pieces.
Interesting.
Usually I was playing bass though. So I was familiar and comfortable with exploring, you know, like dual amped, you know, pseudo stereo type rigs to try and capture a wider sound. But this was the first project. This is the first project that I have played guitar in, because I've always played bass or drums.
That's interesting. Okay, so because it feels very much like the form has followed the function for this band, which is to say that it seems hard to imagine this music being presented in any other way, almost to a certain degree at this point. And
Yeah.
I was curious how much of that was just, hey, what's the fewest amount of schedules that we can have?
I mean, that's totally absolutely part of it. I mean,
Well, sure. I mean, look, it's a pain in the ass to have adult human beings with adult responsibilities around.
Yeah.
So the fewer you can have to contend with, the easier it is, right?
yeah, well, exactly. There's certain aspects of a 2-piece that can be expedited by just having 2 people.
Right.
And then there's, on the flip side, there's certain things that, you know, I think I heard somebody recently say something about like having a third person to break up those, not arguments, but where you're debating on something and both persons on a different side.
Right.
So, but
you have a tiebreaker almost.
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
But generally it's great, and I'm at this point very comfortable functioning in 2-piece bands.
So what led you to, because again, if you mostly were doing bass before, what led you to be like, no, this is going to be guitar, and how much of the technical functionality towards doing Bronson Arm were just born off of doing that? Like, and the reason why I asked that, because this isn't like a super techie show or anything, but I think you have an interesting setup. Like you've got the stereo out thing and the
Well, I remember when I started doing 2-pieces with bass and guitar that I specifically chose that route because I wanted a thick, full sound.
right.
You know, and at the time was and still am a huge fan of like Big Business.
Absolutely.
But I remember sitting down. I hadn't been at the time. I'd never really used fuzz pedals and exploring fuzz pedals. So I borrowed like as many as I could get my hands on, and just sat down and I was like, I'm going to pick a fuzz pedal to explore and
make that my thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Find a way to incorporate it and decide how I want to use it, and mess around with some guitar and bass. And at the time I felt that the tones I enjoyed out of a good fuzz sounded best when it was just a single note, where I could hear the blossoming qualities and the decays just off a single note. So I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna do bass.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I did that for a while, and I loved it, but definitely at points felt limited and wanted to explore higher registers without going into a 5 or 6 string bass or something like that. So,
which has negative social connotations for good reason.
yeah. So
baritone.
Yeah. I when Garrett and I first met, I set up my guitar rig and kind of did what I'd done in previous bands, which is just like, okay, if this is my instrument, how low can I tune it and still, with the rig I have, get a sound that feels good and
it's defined. It's not mushy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
or not mushy in the wrong places.
Exactly. So just kind of came up with a drop open tuning that's absolutely in the baritone register, and then just took it from there. But yeah, it's, the fact that it's a 2-piece in the rig that I have absolutely drives how I write and what we write, because there's, it's like, there's even one of the songs on this album, it's like where I was like, how much can I divide that kind of lower droney bass stuff and let that breathe for a bit, and then introduce brighter things? Like how much can I play with the dynamics between those two?
Right. Because you have to kind of think about those things when you're basically driving all of the melody and like part of the rhythm.
Yeah.
On one instrument, right? I mean.
Yeah. So I definitely tend to do a lot of kind of droney stuff. I mean, not like drone music, but just the way that I play.
No, open notes and
let certain notes ring out and decay, and just make sure I'm not bumping that open ringing note while I'm doing other things, stuff like that.
I'm a big fan. There's entire records. It's like, oh yeah, no, you're playing that wrong. There's supposed to be a note ringing out literally that whole time.
Yeah,
and that's I love that kind of stuff. Well, and it's interesting because it gives you, like, I feel like there's touchstones to what like any band, to what Bronson Arm does. Like, you can certainly fixate on what that is, like what, be it like, your Sonic Youths or Fugazi, Shellac, like whatever. But I think you guys have your own sensibility to it that, like, it comes across as uniquely you, which is what I feel like bands should do.
Yeah.
Frankly.
Yeah.
And maybe some think they're doing that, and that's good for them. But so you have your own sound with it, but it's almost at least partially driven by the instrumentation and the fact that, like, you're using what could be seen as construed limitations and using them as a tool in the tool belt.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the advantage is that you don't have to worry about conflicting melodies and things that, disadvantage if you break a string, you're boned, but
yeah. I mean, at this point, don't run into so many challenges with it being a 2-piece.
Well, because you've done it for a number of years now at this point.
Yeah.
Right? So you have that kind of telepathy that you develop where you know how each other plays intrinsically, and you can kind of not fake your way through, but you don't have to worry about the fundamental basics of playing together, so you can kind of concentrate on other things, and you can push it different ways.
But it's when we started, it was really important for me to, as we wrote songs, to have a variety of elements in there. I was not paranoid, but really wanted to avoid having all the songs sound the same, because it had been in many bands where it's like you zero in on a thing and you're like, this works, let's do it again.
Yeah, let's just keep doing this thing that people seem to like.
And which could be a great way for a band to like define their thing, you know?
Sure.
But whenever I've done that, it's usually like right around the 2-album mark. It's like,
Yeah, it's like, what else you got? Oh,
I
nothing?
want to
Okay.
do this other thing, but at this point, it would feel like so much of a departure.
Right.
I don't know if it would be received well. So it was important for me to like right out of the gate, like try to explore a variety of, you know, dynamics and tempos and, you know, slow burners and fast bangers and, you know, things were really riff dense, but then things were sparse. So I'm really happy. I think we pulled that off successfully.
Yeah, I mean, you have a thing where it sounds very much like your own thing, which is, you know, some bands struggle for that their entire life. Of course, the answer then is, well, what do you do next, right?
Yeah.
And in some cases, some bands don't know the answer to that question either. But you know, it comes across pretty authoritatively and allows you to work with that palette. How many bands have you been in?
Roughly 7.
Okay.
And most of them were just kind of casual and for fun.
Sure.
I started when I didn't start really, you know, first instrument I picked up was a bass guitar. I didn't really pick that up till I was 19. And shortly thereafter, moved to Missoula, Montana, and was going to school there. And my friend and roommate who played guitar started getting into audio recording stuff. And I just got really obsessed and heavy into that, and have found a way to turn that into, you know, like a career.
Right. Which the mastering.
Yeah. So
yeah.
For a long time, I think I approached it like this thing, like I felt like you couldn't do both. Like if you're going to be a working engineer, you're not going to have time or energy, you know, that it's best to just really focus on one thing. And then just at a certain point, I decided, fuck that. You know, that
but what if, fuck that?
As long as it's not interfering, and I can find ways to make it work, you know, so relatively recently I've, you know, been pushing and focusing more on my personal music.
Right, sure. Which doesn't mean, you know, you forget how to do the other stuff or anything
Exactly.
along those lines. I mean, you can look. Case in point, I do lots of stuff. You know, you can do it. It just requires usually a good amount of time management.
Yes.
I'm curious about the Emerald Circuit stuff. Like, is that something that was just born of your own personal need, or kind of curiosity, or?
Yeah, that was in my last band where I was playing bass, and initially I just had a sound in my head that I couldn't find a pedal to do it. You know, I wanted basically an overdrive for bass that allowed me to take the driven sounds I was already getting off the amp by itself, to push it just a little bit more and still retain a sense of dynamics within the playing,
right,
and not lose all the low end, because at least at the time, and all the pedals I could get my hands on, all the pedals that were for bass to my ear sounded really compressed, and it sounded like they were rolling off too much of the highs.
Yeah.
which if you're in a 3 or 4 piece band, I mean, that's kind of what you want. But when it's a 2-piece, where I wanted to cover as much, as wide of a sonic territory as possible, I wasn't finding what I wanted. And then conversely, all the guitar pedals that had more openness and didn't sound so compressed were cutting out all the lows.
Right.
So I just locked myself in my studio and figured it out. And it took a long time, but it was very rewarding and fun, and immediately had friends and colleagues saying they wanted to buy one of them. So
right, because you got something where there's not a lot of, as you mentioned, there's not a lot of things like that allow for frequency dependent gain saturation, right? Like, so you have like something for like low, some for the highs. So what works in one band is absolutely not going to work in another band.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
At all.
Exactly.
And so, there have been pedals that I love it's like, oh yeah, if this only had a MIDI control, this would be amazing. Yeah. it's like I'd love to be able to boost these mids or like cut the mids or whatever.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the Emerald Circus thing started as filling a need for a tool that I just couldn't find.
Right.
And then having a lot of fun with it. And then, I mean, from a business, it's a thing I do. I don't know if it would really be considered a business, but it's a side thing. It's fun, and I get a lot out of it, and I sell pedals. So it's definitely a supplementary thing, but
yeah. Brings in a little money.
When I started it, I had all these friends that were giving me advice on like how to go about it, and it was kind of like an experiment or like a fun thing, because it was like I get what all the information people were telling me. People were telling me like, small, compact, don't take up a lot of real estate.
Yeah.
Got to have the really nice graphics on there and a catchy name. And I was like, I don't want to fucking do that. And from a business and, a manufacturing standpoint, it's like, get the cheapest components you can get circuit boards, and you can pay other people to like populate them and streamline it so you can boost your margins. And I was just like, that's like not at all what I want to do.
That's the opposite of what I want to do.
I was like, I'm gonna like buy, like I literally just kind of did the opposite. I was like, well, I'm gonna buy the like most expensive components I can find. I'm gonna hand wire it. Like I'll come up with like a graphic language and kind of like a branding vibe to it, but it's going to be really simple.
Yeah.
And the names are not going to be catchy. And they're going to be big,
Right.
Which I will absolutely admit at this point, I value the benefit of a compact pedal, not the mini ones.
No. You don't need to go too crazy with it, but
so I've been experimenting with, some more compact-ish pedals, because most of my pedals are pretty big, but
anyone's ever flown with a pedal board knows the challenge, which like
I'm sure.
I'm not going to call them out, but there's some pedals I love where it's like, this does not need to be this big.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
where it's like, I've looked inside this is like 1/3 empty space.
But
it's like, all right, we get
a large portion of the reason I stuck initially with larger pedals was I think one of the ways that I got into it was that I knew how to solder and do light repair work on just studio equipment.
Sure.
And I would constantly have friends and colleagues be like, hey, whatever, my pedal or my amp stopped working. Can you check it out? And back then I would usually be like, well, I'll check it out. I can't guarantee I'm going to be able to fix anything, but I'll take a look. And just being really frustrated with a lot of the more compact designs, because it was like similar to like a modern car where it's like, I just need to change the alternator, but I have to take half the fucking engine apart
to
just
get
to swap
at it.
out
Yeah.
fucking. So in my head, I was like, I want to offer these out and put like a significantly longer warranty and like back it in a way. And if I'm gonna have to repair it, I want to be able to get in there easily without having to disassemble everything.
Right.
So there was definitely a longer term vision thing associated with having slightly bigger pedals, but yeah.
Well, but it also, again, the function matters more than anything, right? Like, and they are cool looking. Like, I like the decor, like the sort of the aesthetic of them. I think that there's a minimalist sort of vibe to it.
Yeah.
That's appealing, but it's also like, what does it do? Like, you'd have the coolest looking pedal in the world, but it sounds like garbage. Sounds like trash from the trash can. No one's gonna want it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, it's a thing where I'm sure I could market them in a different way and find more success, but I think the concept behind a lot of it is still important to me. Like, I don't label anything,
Right.
Where part of the idea, I mean, yeah, part of that is that it's a pain in the ass to fucking label everything, but I want to encourage experimentation. And I've always felt that, I mean, a lot of younger players, especially, it's like, oh, it's the gain, I'm going to crank it to the top.
Mm-hmm.
Like bass, give it all. Treble, it's just like where everything's dimed.
It's maxed out, yeah.
And I want to encourage experimentation and someone to just use their ears instead of just read something and be like, okay, well, I want all that.
Well, it's like Legos, right? Like, when you and I were kids, like, here's your box of Legos, kid, go at it. And now it's like, here's the thing to build from this Lego set, where it's like, well, cool. I mean, that's cool. But like, for me, half the fun was like, look at this crazy whack thing I put together that like is going to collapse under its own weight eventually. But who knows? But it's like, that's the fun of doing
colors.
It. Yeah, exactly. None of it makes sense. This part's gray. This part's yellow. It's but that was part of the fun of it, is like putting it together. Whereas I feel like their Legos push. I didn't expect to have such Lego discourse on this show, by the way, but the Legos push towards like, oh no, build the thing. This you can make this thing, and here's the instructions to make it. Well, what's the fun in that, man?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a model builder, maybe it's great, but like for me, the Legos is all about like I made this thing. It's got a weird distended, beefy cyborg arm. Like who knows? Like who knows what's happening? Right? None of it makes sense. There's just disembodied heads on top of this for some reason. Like
exactly.
The whole thing looks like a John Carpenter nightmare, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Like because that lets your imagination like run free. So it's interesting that we're getting to the point of like, the commodification of everything being that these are the settings to sound like this. This is the settings to sound like, this band and do this. Well, why would you want to just do that? Why don't you just do your own thing?
But, find something fresh and slowly get comfortable and confident with it.
Yeah, and maybe someday you'll have your own preset. Who knows?
Exactly. Write your own presets.
How did you first? So baritone's an interesting instrument because I feel like if you know, right? The people that know all about it. And other people are like, that's a weird looking guitar. What was the first instance of you seeing a baritone used in music that like caught your attention as an instrument?
A bandmate of mine had one, and I was playing with it, and it just, there was a certain response to it that with the gauge of the strings responded and felt like a bass, which I was comfortable with, but it felt to me more like a guitar than a bass.
Right.
And for clarification, I say that I play baritone. I'm still using a standard Fender scale length instrument, but I'm putting baritone gauge strings on them.
Right, and the tonality of it is
But
closer.
but just being able to do that, it was just a way to. Because when I decided I wanted to explore the guitar, you can only detune the strings so much before they're just getting super floppy. So
Flappy spaghetti, yeah.
So getting
One of
thicker
the reasons I played
strings-
12s for so long. People are like, you play jazz? I'm like, no, I do not.
Yeah, yeah,
I do not play jazz.
yeah. So it's just what felt like a comfortable way for me to get into it. And in my head, I was like,
Right.
it's a little different. So hopefully there'll be unique qualities about it, and maybe I can just explore something with
Right.
a fresh perspective.
Use that as like a sonic identity almost. I saw Silkworm do it. It's probably the first in the 90s, and I was like, what is, like, I hear bass, but like these dudes seem to both be playing guitars. Like, what's going, like, I didn't understand what was happening. And then later on I saw it with Sleater Kinney. I'm like, oh, it's a different kind of guitar that is lower.
Yeah.
And then that was way before I heard of a bass 6 too, which I was like, oh my God, there's like one that's even
Yeah, exactly.
crazier and lower than all those things. That is almost like functionally useless as a live instrument, but great for composition.
I conceptually was like, oh, I've got to try out one of those bass 6s, and then a friend was selling one, and I went over and checked it out, and I was just like,
Too much.
It's not going to work for me.
Yeah, they're cool, but there's a reason why nobody uses them.
Yeah. And yeah,
Peace of love.
Also why you see them for sale used all the time.
Yeah, all the time, because you're like, I don't know what to do with this. I have this, so like I use that in like one song, and like I don't know. It's I mean, they can be cool for as a writing implement, right? You know, it's like for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the baritone is interesting that like amongst a certain type of music nerd, people will be like, they'll know like all right, Blind Shake. That's another good example. Aggressive music being played with a baritone guitar, right? Great, awesome.
Yeah.
But if you talk to like, average person at Guitar Center, they'll be like, what? No, the basses are over there. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm asking about though.
Yeah.
and it's interesting. They're almost kind of oblique instrument in that way, in the least oblique instrument category of music, which is to say guitars, which is the most obvious of all of them.
Yeah. Exactly.
But then also think about like, what's the biggest band that like uses a baritone consistently? Well, people have used baritones in like bigger bands for sure, but there really aren't huge examples of like, oh, that's so-and-so, they use a baritone guitar. Like it's like, if there are, I don't know about them. Let's put it that way.
I hadn't actually thought about that. And I
can name like 5 indie rock famous examples, but like that doesn't matter. I'm talking about for like your average, Guitar World reader.
Yeah.
Or what, or something along those lines. There's bound to be someone at some point, but I don't know. So you got so that's Emerald Circuits. You've been what the focus on doing mastering that comes like what in the 2000s, right? Like somewhere around there.
Yeah, early 2000s. Yeah.
Were you a proponent of with Bob Weston did that whole Loudness Wars thing on the Chicago Mastering Service website? Do you remember this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That was was a weird time for mastering.
Yeah, that's when that was going on. I was managing and running the back end stuff of a recording studio, and I was so glad he wrote that because
with visual aids yet.
Yeah.
Which like, oh yeah, this brick wall is the at the drive-in, and here's like My Bloody Valentine Loveless, which everyone is common thinks it was like one of the loudest records. And it's like, no, you can see peaks and valleys all over the place on here.
Yeah,
this is just like a nuanceless canon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Noise.
I mean, it's something that fascinated me from working and recording and mixing albums, God, almost every day for 3 years straight, where, there's definitely a handful of projects where we would work on something and you get the dynamics and depth like just right, and then the clients and artists approve it, hand it off, they take it to the mastering guy, and then we get a chance to hear what the artist had approved for the project, and it would just be like, what the fuck happened to
Right.
all those dynamics? Like,
Yeah.
like, yes, it's loud, but like it's just obliterated. And
it reminds me of that Exquisite Corpse, that game, Exquisite Corpse, where you make a drawing, like somebody makes the head, somebody else makes the body, and someone else makes the legs. It's sort of like I saw this where it's like recording, mixing, mastering, and mastering. It was like cartoon, like
yes,
it was like a 5-year-old did it.
Yeah,
but it's all like professional artist, like okay, talented amateur to like just like come on.
Yeah, but definitely during that period, I mean that was definitely one of the things that inspired me to focus on mastering, was that a lot of the clients I would work with would send it off to get mastered and then get it back. And that was a separate department. It's not my department.
Yeah.
So they would be like, what do you think? And I'd be like, it's not bad. What do you think?
Yeah. As the client, what are your thoughts on this? Yeah.
They're like, well, I don't know. It wasn't really like this. And I was hoping for more of that. And my first response would be, well, did you talk to them about that? Did you have discussions telling them what you thought about it? And a lot of times the response was just like, well, I mean, they're the mastering engineer. They know what to do.
And, do they though?
And,
do they?
and I was like, well, like the name master is on it, but they're not like an elevated, like, yes, they absolutely have a ton of experience in their field, but you're the artist.
Right. Is it the way you're visioning to be? Yeah.
A one definitive landing zone for what the finished product is supposed to be like. There's a variety of ways it could be taken, and then hearing stories from other clients where they're like, oh, well, I did talk to the mastering engineer, but they said, well, hey, if you want it on the radio, this is it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, well, what radio? And do you think that's your primary goal or not? Yeah.
So I was just definitely driven to, offer a mastering service that focused a lot on open communication with the clients.
Sure.
And I'll usually, always get descriptions of kind of what they're looking for, and I take that into mind, but I'll usually just do what sounds right and what the material and the mix will allow me to do.
Sure, yeah.
And present that and be like, hey, it could be a little louder if you wanted it to. I felt this, just open communication and be like, what do you want? Do you let me know what you think. If you want it louder, I can make it a little bit louder. I can make it softer.
Yeah.
Like we have some flexibility there, and try to approach it as much as you reasonably can as a collaborative thing.
Well, because it's not one size fits all. And then also one of the biggest advantages a mastering engineer can bring to the table is just being an outside ear.
Exactly.
Right? Of like, hey, this is the sibilance on this is like wild, great. Like, is this, are you looking for that? Like, is this like the intended effect?
you know, and absolutely, and I mean that's the whole thing of mastering is when you're in the recording studio and recording and mixing on one set of one or two sets of speakers in one room through one system, you might not hear. No room is fucking perfect. Absolutely not.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
like every room is different, and by sending it out to somebody who's outside of the bubble in a fresh perspective is by nature just allowing a situation to pick up on things that just might literally not have been heard in the recording and mixing studio.
Yeah, not even like, professional malfeasance or anything. Just like you're literally in the same space doing the same things like for forever, and
exactly.
It's like being nose blind. It's like being.
I think it's a critical part of the process,
right?
And and there's times where maybe I'll get a project and be really excited and just like, fuck yeah, I nailed this shit.
Right.
And send it off. And the client's like, oh, this is cool, but we were thinking whatever. We're thinking this. And as I'm reading, the email response, I'm like, that's the worst fucking idea. But
it's their record, right?
But then I go and set up my console and start revisiting the material and exploring what they were, what I could decipher from their written email. And I'm like, oh, that actually does sound fucking good.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I get it. So, I think it's important for, any engineer to have a willingness to explore,
to listen
out of their comfort zone, but it's one of the things that keeps me interested and excited about mastering is because everything is fucking different. No two projects are identical.
Can't be one size fits all, right?
Every time I think like I've gotten like I don't want to say like a preset process, but like, oh yeah, this compressor's works on everything, and if I just hit it harder here but hit it soft, like every time I think that I like, oh dude, I got this, right. Like I get a project that's like all my normal go-to stuff is not fucking working,
right?
And I have to like just put aside all of my regular notions and explore. And that's, it's challenging, but it's that challenge is what keeps it fun and not just get fucking boring. Because if it was just like, set it up with the same shit every time, it would not be, I wouldn't have fun.
Yeah. Slap on a fake smile and power through this. All right, great.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome. Well, yeah. And I think there's also a fundamental misunderstanding of what mastering is, even amongst people that ought to know better.
Yeah, totally. And I used to be like that when I was younger and just getting into recording and stuff, and like a project studio in my basement. It was like I remember one band that I recorded. A band I was in. We recorded our album, mixed it, sent it off, got it back, and I was like, all right, let's check this out. Like let's check out what I did as a mastering thing versus what we got back versus the raw mix. And it was like I couldn't hear much of a difference at the time, and I was like, you don't need to get stuff mastered. In hindsight, I had shitty monitors and consumer grade gear, and I literally couldn't hear those differences. You know what I mean?
if you're playing it out of like a MacBook on the built-in speakers, you're not going to notice the nuance of it. But if you're on a nice system, you're like, wow, why does it sound so much worse than
Yeah.
everything else that I play on.
Well, I mean, and that's the thing too, is it's like a big part of the mastering process and thing is like, it's fairly easy to get a mix sounding good on the set of speakers that you're comfortable and familiar with.
Sure.
But
That's not
then what
hard.
does it sound like on the stereo in the living room? What
What
does
does it sound like in the
your car?
van? What does it sound like in headphones?
What does it sound like on a phone? Which
Yeah.
is these days where a lot of people, unfortunately, are probably listening to most of their music, but definitely getting their first impressions of a new music. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
So there's, you know, it's unfortunate that at times I'll get a project and be working on it and be like, this sounds fucking amazing here and now, but I just know from experience it's not going to it needs more work applied to it to make it, to narrow the margins and have it sound good across all the stereo systems and platforms, versus just fucking amazing here and lackluster on like everything else. You know what I mean? So
yeah, we have this crazy audiophile system with these like, you know, multi-$1,000 speakers and power amps, everything. It sounds lovely, you know, great.
Yeah.
But how many people are listening to it on that? You know?
So it's a challenge at times when I just from experience know that like this sounds so fucking good, but I need to, I don't want to use the word dumb it down, but like just level things so that it's you know, taking the bigger picture into consideration so that it's more transparent across all the different playback systems.
And streaming services and things do that as well, and you have to take those into account. I mean, everybody now everybody looks back at MySpace and like, wow, we didn't know how good we had it. And while on some aspects I would agree with that, like what they did to on that music player of theirs was like, you know, it should be tried by the Hague as far as I'm concerned. Like, it's like horrible. And it's like that was a lot of people's like experience with music. I was like, wow. So you're just hearing this like with this blunt force trauma crushing of this music and you know, square peg into the round hole.
And that's definitely one of the challenges with, you know, like heavier music is if it's not mastered right, it'll maybe the initial impact of that single is like, oh fuck yeah, like bring it on, this is so
sounds great,
full on and in your face, but like 2-3 songs in, your ears are exhausted.
Right. That's the I hate to pick on them, but that's that At the Drive-In record, the big major label one. I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. I wish I could listen to it more than 2 or 3 songs at a time.
And I think that's, you know, that's
so exhausting.
Prime example of what like the Loudness War stuff
absolutely.
was, is, you know, the at the time the market and the popular trends and tastes were just incredibly loud and in your face to get that initial wow impact.
Yeah.
But when applied to a body of work,
it's garbage.
It was just detrimental to the listening experience of the body of work. Like, yeah, it worked as a single for that one thing, but across the board, it's not going to work.
It's interesting. There's kind of been a few studies talking about the lack of cultural immersion for many bands and records from the 2000s, and I wonder if that might have something to do with it. Just in the fact that, like,
one more time, the lack of cultural immersion.
Thinking about the fact that, like, okay, the 90s are quote unquote back, right? People are listening to like and rediscovering bands from the 90s. 80s never went away. 70s are back. But it feels like the 2000s like has not had a resurgence in that way, and I wonder if it has to do with the oftentimes, even from bands you think would know better, these really aggressive brick wall mastering, where it just makes it exhausting to listen to. This is a good tape op article, by the way. We don't necessarily have to work it out right now, but
yeah, no, that would be fascinating.
I literally just thought of this. I don't know if anyone else has like done a study on it. Someone probably has somewhere, but it was so common. To just like, oh, this record is great. I wish, when are they going to do a remaster of it?
Yeah.
I can't wait for that.
Yeah. During COVID and pandemic shutdown, where nobody was recording, I mean, people were, but obviously to significantly lesser degree. Nobody was making albums regularly. But it was interesting that I had a lot of my loyal customers who wanted to revisit older material, and just being like, yeah, like, I have this, could you remaster it? So that that was an interesting thing that I'm sure people are still trickling out and spreading out. But yeah, during pandemic shutdown, the majority of my work was remastering material that had previously been released.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's like, I think there's a propensity towards kind of being nostalgic, and we're looking back in the past at things, right? Anyway,
Yeah.
And then also, for lack of a better term, people had time for all those projects and think, oh yeah, I should do that someday. It's like, all right, well, later is now. Well, no better time than doing it right now.
I had a conversation with a friend during pandemic where we were talking about the way people listen to music and what they want and their attention spans. And he was commenting on, he was like, for a long time, I've just been listening to a lot of these bands and music where I wanted quick, hard, fast. But now that we're in pandemic shutdown, I just want to listen to a whole fucking album.
Right. Exactly.
I don't want those songs that are 1.5 to 2.5 minutes. I want to listen to those 8-minute songs.
Things that you had been impatient for in the past.
Yeah.
And rediscovering that, patience can be lovely.
Yeah.
As it turns out. And then also, I think it also, people realize how reprogrammed that they had been to, think of things in small sample size sets. And that, again, this mindset that everyone's being taught that they're busy all the time. Even like, well, what are you busy with?
Yeah.
You're being made to feel busy so people can sell you solutions you don't need. That's the problem. And I say that as someone that is one of the most objectively busiest people that I know. But that said, like, a lot of I'm busy. Well, what? With what? With dealing with the world? Yeah. I mean, that's how it's.
Everything.
Yeah, it's like, of course. I mean, it's just a weird thing to have, like, psychological constructs like that monetized and thrown back at us to sell us crap we don't need.
Yeah.
Tell me about the record, man. Let's go through this record, the Bronson Arm self-titled. In fact, if you're into it, let's give it a little preamble. We can even go through it song by song, and you can tell us a little bit about everything song by song.
Sure.
Let's start with here. I'll just do a screen share. It'll be easier this way. Let's start with the record cover.
Yeah.
There it is.
The record cover was I have a friend who's a photographer back in Montana, and that was a photo I had seen he posted, somewhere on social media that just
pretty
I was
evocative image.
immediately drawn to.
It looks like a Bellatar movie poster or something. Like,
yeah, I mean, he grew up. I hope I'm going to say this right. I think it was Heart Butte Indian Reservation, and so that was somewhere when he was just walking around his hometown, and snapped that, and it's just to me was just absolutely captivating.
Yeah.
And he was kind enough. His name's Tim Arrowtop. He was kind enough to let us use it as our cover. And what was a challenge is, I went to school for for painting and drawing and have a bachelor's degree in fine arts. But as I, designing a cover and the layout, I'm like strapping, it's like I think oftentimes the mentality is like, okay, here's the cover. You got to make the band name big and bold so it's recognizable. And no matter what the fuck I did, it felt like it was taking away and distracting
from the image,
from the imagery.
Yeah.
Regardless of how big or little or, experimented with making the lettering gray and small and dropping it in a corner. I was like, that still just fucking takes away from it. So, like the approach to the pedal business thing, I was like, I'm just fuck it. I'm just do the opposite. Like, it's just not going to have any lettering on the front, but I'll try to make up for it and put it big on the back.
Right. Well, and it's a bold, like, all professional advice would say, the last thing you want to do is leave off the band name and the album name on the front, but
I was like, fuck it.
Yeah, but also counterpoint, who cares?
Yeah. Well, exactly. I mean, and for this phase of the band, my thought was nobody really knows about us in a big picture anyway.
Right.
So maybe just the nature of the image itself will pull people in and make them curious. And if not, whatever.
Well, let's go through each of the songs here. It doesn't have to be like anything specifically. It could be like where the title came from, anything about the composition, recording, lyrics, whatever floats your boat. There's no right answer to it. Just give a little insight into the record. So let's go song by song. So first one is Pleasure Brea.
Yeah. One thing I'll mention about all the song titles is I love the idea of people being able to draw their own conclusions from things.
Mm-hmm.
I always felt that titles often give away too much information.
Okay.
When I was in art school, I would typically, I was always asked to give titles to pieces, and I, in rebellion against that, I usually just labeled things untitled, number, fucking whatever. I just didn't want to.
Sure. Yeah.
So it may change at some point, but I usually just pick words that caught my attention. I have a list of an ongoing ridiculously long list on my phone of just phrases or one-liners or just pairings of words that tingle my brain. So really none of the titles really describe anything about the song. Not directly. There's definitely indirect things, but yeah, first song, Pleasure Brea. That was that's probably that. I think that's the first song Garrett and I wrote together. And most of our lyrics I come up with after getting most of the song together. I mean, shit, sometimes I don't even finalize what the exact words are going to be until I'm sitting down with the microphone in front
walking
of me.
up to the booth. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm very into having variations or alternate lyrics that I experiment with as we're playing out, and I kind of put it together often at the last second. But that was the first song we wrote, and I remember one thing I remember about is the what you might call like a chorus section of it that in my head, there's this part where I do a fast raking on the guitar.
Yeah.
And I remember looking over at Garrett and being like, okay, during this part, man, that's where you should do the drum roll attack on the snare. And he was like, that's so obvious. I'm going to do it at the other part. And I'm like, well, that's where you should do maybe a tom thing or let it breathe a little bit. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that.
We're going to do it the other way around.
I'm going to do the exact opposite. And I remember initially being like, oh, that's, just like, whatever, let's give it a shot. And then I was like, oh shit, that
sounds unique. Sounds cool.
Creates a really pleasant push and pull tension, because when he's rat-a-tat driving on the snare, I'm backing off, and then when I drive in hard on the raking, he's backing off. And I think it definitely, especially because it was one of the first songs we wrote, laid a template of how Garrett and I work together, where there's a lot of times when I bring a song to practice for us to explore and put together. Having played drums myself, I have an idea of what could work. I'm never set in like, that's what it needs to be. But oftentimes I'll present them as like, well, if you are struggling with this part, this is what I was thinking. But, Garrett comes from such a different musical background. His ideas are very different and refreshing. And moving forward, we've learned how to embrace that.
What's his background?
Well, I just mean like, I grew up. I mean, I listened to all kinds of music, all over the fucking map. But in my, when I was a teenager, gravitated to a lot of punk, like a lot of Dead Kennedys,
sure,
Fugazi, and then into heavier stuff like the Melvins. And Garrett is, I'm probably wrong, but I want to say he's maybe 10 years younger than myself. And so a lot of the things that I was exposed to, he just wasn't. Right.
He's going to have a different path into stuff.
Yeah. And so he grew up listening to a lot of, hardcore and emo stuff, and which I never got into. Like, I appreciate, but I never delved into and really explored it. So just those types of differences, just the inspirations and things we've heard that we grew up on are just different. So I think that just right there has been a benefit.
Sure. Well, that's one of the things that leads to the voice of the band.
Yeah.
How about Hard Pass?
Hard Pass was initially inspired from, I pull a lot of my inspiration from scrolling through YouTube and watching live performances of bands that I like just random old stuff, like definitely not high production, like, old
Target
VHS
video
type stuff or stuff on a phone.
Yeah.
And the one that inspired that was a late 80s footage from a Melvins concert where it was hard to tell what was going on, but it almost appeared that the power cut out because like mid riff of a song, the bass just cut out and the lights on stage went out and it's like pitch black.
Mhm.
And then you hear the drums slowly come to a halt, but Buzzo kept on, his guitar was like half working.
Right. Okay.
And he just kept on hammering out this like single note with this kind of janky rhythm until the power came back on, which was like 3 minutes later. And then all of a sudden the lights come on, you hear the bass player, oh yeah, shit, I'm back. And then they kick back into a song. But it was I really liked that just single note thing. And so that one of the themes in that song is this pounding of a single note with this space around it. And that was the launching point for that song. And then, that was another early song. But I think I get a lot of times things that capture my ear and tickle my brain are things like almost in between songs or like intros of songs.
Okay.
Where I'll hear something and be like, holy shit, that's fucking so cool. And I'll stop it. I'm like, I don't want to hear the rest of the song.
Right.
Like,
you're good with
I
the
do,
transition.
it's gonna like change what I think is gonna happen. Like I want to hear that intro and have that excitation and not knowing what's gonna happen, and then like I'll write what I think or would want to follow that intro. Yeah.
That's interesting. All right. Tedious Company. How about that one?
That was that was a really fun. That was, I mean, Bronson Arm doesn't have, and I'm sure it's the same with a lot of different bands, but we don't have one set way of creating what we come up with. Oftentimes it's something we do together, and just as many times it's something that I've worked out a lot of at home and then I bring it to a practice. But this one was interesting, and it doesn't happen. It's happened a few times, but this is one where it was pure spontaneity, where we were maybe in a rut as far as writing new material and had however many half finished songs that weren't going anywhere, and it kind of, did you ever watch the old HBO Tenacious D series?
Oh yeah, of course.
There's like one of those episodes where they're trying to write a song and they're struggling, and Jack Black's like, I'm just going to count to 3 and we're just going to kick it. I'm going to say kick it and you're just going to take, ham down a tasty beat. And I'm going to, it was very similar to that. I mean, Garrett was like, dude, like clear your mind. On the count of 4, I'm just going to start banging out some random shit.
Yeah.
And you just fucking hit it hard.
This rail. Yeah.
And like that song pretty much came out of that, which is not repeatable, because of course we've tried that again. Like, okay,
of course. Well, yeah, if it works, try it again. Yeah,
not fucking work. But
like garbage or different version of the same thing, or
yeah. But that was
that one time it worked.
That was a really fun, spontaneous thing where, within 5-10 minutes the song was basically written.
Right. That's great.
That was a really fun one.
Conscious Confuser.
Yeah, that was a song that I definitely saved. Excuse me. I definitely saved writing lyrics for last. and I was struggling to find something that felt unique to the song, because especially since lyrics in general aren't at the top of my priority. Like when I listen to other people's music, I'm not really listening to the words. I'm listening to how they're delivered and the
The
space
rhythm of it or something, right?
yeah. So it's easy for me to feel that what I'm doing is repetitive and leaning on the same bag of tricks. And I was really struggling with that one. So what I did was like grab an acoustic guitar and just kind of jam or do like faux solo stuff or like a layer on top of it, and find a melody or something that caught my ear. And I found something that would definitely be more of a singing voice thing versus a barking, shouting yell.
Yeah.
And so, and that was, relatively, not as confident in it when I wrote it and laid it down, but soon got comfortable with it. But that is, I think one thing that's unique about that song is there's a portion of it where I'm singing.
Right, like proper singing.
Yeah, and and it's something I definitely want to continue to explore, but it's a challenge because I like what it does and I like what it did, but it's definitely it's for me anyway something that would be easy to not do correctly.
Yeah.
For me, I'm sure a lot of people can pull it off and nail it, but I of course want to feel good and confident about what I'm doing, and I'm not
Ideally, yeah. It's an ideal
I'm not
situation.
necessarily saying, I don't think I'm necessarily talking about the delivery of my singing voice. I'm just saying it maybe there's an aspect about it that feels very vulnerable that I'm still getting comfortable with. Maybe that's what it is.
Fair enough. His Ilk is the next one.
That I would say that's our one protest song. If we had a protest song, that would be the protest song. And again, the lyrics always come after the fact, but
Right.
the writing the music for it, I watched this. I'm sure a lot of other people have seen it. It's like a late 80s video of Nirvana with Dale Crover behind the drum kit, playing in like a Radio Shack.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the songs they do, it seemed like some of it was like lip syncing or like they were trying to do like a video thing shoot. But one of the songs that they were messing around with, Kurt was playing this just very simple churning and sickly disorientating little thing on the guitar, and then you have Dale Crover just doing what he does,
doing his Dale thing. Yep.
It was just fucking beautiful,
Yeah.
because it was just this, it was like this soft, delicate, but again, sickly little guitar thing with this pummeling drum thing behind it. And when I heard that, I wanted to try to capture some of those qualities where there's in my mind, I was envisioning being on an old, an old ship in the ocean and just getting rocked back and forth. And I wanted to create a sound sonically that, borderline made you sick to your stomach, but then would hit into a driving, chorus part where everything came together and felt good for a moment, but then you go back to this, dizzying, disorientating bit, and just kind of play with going back and forth,
Right. Yeah, as like an ethos almost.
And then the lyrics, a lot of the lyrics on this body of work were written during pandemic shutdown. So it's definitely a protest song.
How about Drain the Coffers?
That one was another one that was borderline spontaneously written. Sometimes what I do when I'm looking for inspiration for a song is I have a collection of photographs. How when you're like scrolling through like Instagram, you can like save a picture.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I have a long collection of saved photos. So I'll see
just stuff you saw and thought looked cool.
I'll see a picture of just a fucking band fucking rocking the fuck out.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'll look at the picture and try to imagine whatever they're doing sounds like. And so that song was from a picture of daughters playing their most recent album. It was a black and white photo that just grabbed me. That was just like, oh my God, I want to know what they're playing. And the song, of course, doesn't sound anything like
remotely like what's in your imagination. Sure. Yeah.
But it's like a mental trick that I use to try to capture an energy or inspire an energy.
Nice.
But that's how we came up with that one. And, looking back at a lot of the lyrical content of the record as a whole, a lot of it is, I don't know if you experience the same thing, but for me, the meaning for it changes over time. And I maybe have an intention of what I want to communicate, but I'm not terribly good with words. So a lot of times down the road, I have different insight and in addition to probably that my personal attachment to them, I fit maybe I fit in different meanings to them, but regardless, it changes over time. I think a lot of looking back at it now, I think a lot of the lyrical content is around dominance and submission, and like authority versus the people, and in a broad sense, like not only one-on-one interpersonal relationships, but also, mass bodies of people, and dealing with those frustrations and how things get normalized, and maybe you're being controlled in a way you aren't even aware of until a certain point, or shit, maybe even in certain instances, I'm definitely fascinated with people and people in also groups of people being willingly desiring to be dominated, may not dominated, but directed and told what to do.
Right.
Where
led around or whatever.
Where it's like, and I get that. I get that life is fucking hard and there's a lot of confusing things that we all experience that don't necessarily have a black and white, this is right, this is wrong,
right, shades of gray
result or resolution, and that there's a lot of gray area, and that on some things it can fucking be really easy to just be told what is what and go along with it as a willing participant.
Right.
So I think I'm fascinated with that. So a lot of the material lyrical concepts are exploring a lot of those ideas.
Nice.
Yeah.
How about One with the Floor? How about that one?
What's unique about that song is I feel the only song on the record that when I was starting, like I had a cohesive vision for it from front to back, not in that I immediately knew what every part was going to be, but that as I was starting to write the first bits of it, I knew how I wanted the vocal delivery to feel and what I wanted to communicate with it. But it was written in the fall and we get a lot of fog around here, and I was just looking out my back porch up the hill where we have woods and just watching the eerie mist and fog roll down the hill, and just feeling that I wanted to write a song that it's like summer's over, fall's creeping in, shit's gonna get cold and damp and dark, I mean, not necessarily dreading a seasonal depression thing, but this anticipation of change that can be refreshing as a change, but also aspects of it you're dreading and not looking forward to and trying to prepare yourself for.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But that was another interesting thing about that song is when we finally solidified it as what it would be. I think both Garrett and I were like, at the time, so hyped on it. We were like, this is the fucking one. This is
right.
This is so fucking good. And then quickly, I don't want to say got bored of it, but it fell out of favor. And not that long before the release of the album, we both fucking love it again.
You fell back in love with it, sure.
Fell back in love with it. Like it was just, but it was interesting because it was
I know those
things
vibes
about it that initially got my juices going. It's different things about it the second time around that I'm really vibing with.
Nice. Patsy Ultima.
That song was excuse me. I was listening to Todd Traynor play the drums, and I fucking just love everything he does.
That's great.
And love how, regardless of what he's playing or the context of a song, it's just like, it's like a switch. like when he starts playing, the switch is turned on, and I wouldn't need to hear the bass or guitar. I could be perfectly engaged with just listening to him take control of the wheel and just take it wherever the fuck he wants to.
Yeah.
And so in my head, I had a drum beat and a guitar part to go along with it. And then, of course, when I brought it to Garrett's like, no, that drum, no, I'm going to do this. And I was like, that's totally different, but it still totally works. You know what I mean?
Right. It's different part, but the similar vibe.
Yeah. It had elements of what had inspired the launching point of the song, but of course has ended up being 10 times more entertaining having Garrett do what inspires him. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. If I wouldn't, but if I ever attempted to dictate to my band member what to do, it would never be as exciting,
Right. Well, that's why it's a band, not a solo project, right?
Exactly.
Rabbit Starvation.
This song, when we were talking earlier about the nature of the two-piece and the equipment and the gear, being a heavy influence on what the material is, this song was absolutely part of that kind of concept, where when I wrote this song, up to the point of writing this song, I had my pedal board and equipment lined out where I basically was exclusively playing through my neck pickup, and then with splitters and dual paths, isolated, two pedal paths, and then ran out to two separate rigs. And then just before we wrote this song, I did some work on an old Rickenbacker bass that I used to have, and was repairing the Rico switch thing. And I was like, what the fuck? That's so simple. Why the fuck am I not doing that?
Right. Sure. Yeah.
So I rigged up my guitar to have a stereo output, which at the end of the day, does anybody hear it? I don't know. I fucking hear it. But I'm also a mastering engineer, and my ears attuned to a lot of really subtle things that a lot of people don't necessarily pick up on, which is a blessing and a fucking curse. But
testify. Yeah.
But it was like I had this new rig, and to my ears was getting significant more separation in the tones, because the way I think of it is like, well, obviously I want to capture a wide frequency range.
Sure.
And I love fuzzy, thick, heavily distorted, just blossoming textural tones that are just thick and heavily compressed. But I also like that brighter raking articulation and bite on the top end. So when writing this song, I was like, I want to do a song that at least part of it is taking advantage of those differences. So, the first part of the song and the first half of the song has a lot of just like a muted, almost bass line, and it's just thick and full. And oftentimes when I'm playing it live, you don't hear anything coming out of the guitar channel. I have a bass rig on one side and a guitar stack on the other, and you don't hear anything coming out of the guitar stack. It's all bass. And then you get to that part of the song where it breaks out of the muted part, and all of a sudden
It's coming out of both,
all the
and you have-
focus
yeah.
goes from here to over here.
Right.
So that was a song that was definitely trying to take advantage and use or demonstrate that thing as much as possible. Another thing about this song that's a little different from a lot of the other ones is that I wrote it. I feel it has a lot of the material kind of has a dark, sinister, oblique feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that this song, there's definitely some anxiousness in there, but it feels like a song that has almost like a positive resolution to it.
Right. It's not just a bummer. Sure. Yeah.
And and that was by design. Because it's like you could look at the song and kind of split it down the middle and be like, there's the first part and the second part. And at the time I was driven to, I was like looking back at the body of work we'd created so far and being like, fuck, a lot of this is pretty fucking dark. And looking at what is going on in the world at the time, I mean, and still fucking is happening today, but taking a moment to reflect and say, is that what I really always want to be putting out there? And the lyrical content of the song was almost like a letter to my son, thinking, trying to describe like shit's fucking hard and fucked up, but it's going to be okay. You can figure this out. It's not all doom and gloom.
Right. A little bit of hope near the end there.
Yeah. So that's, I would say that is one thing that is unique about that song.
Devil You Know, last song on the record.
Yeah. This one is different from everything on the record. This was definitely like a studio track. We're never going to be able to pull that off live. Garrett and I had been jamming and building what we wanted to be that song, and only getting so far. Definitely hitting a brick wall at a certain point. Mm-hmm. And when one of the times we had all the recording equipment set up, was just I was like, well, let's just track what we have. And then I told Garrett to, I was like, let's do this, these two parts. Excuse me. These two parts for a bit, but I want you to have a moment.
Right.
Do like a drum thing, like do whatever the fuck you want, because I'll cut it up and paste it and rearrange it and hack shit up in the studio, but like there should be a part of the song where you're, for lack of a better term, doing like a drum solo, like where spotlights.
Right. The focus goes to that.
Yeah, like I was like, I want, not only do I like that, but I wanted there to be an opportunity for him to showcase whatever the fuck he wanted to do without
Sure.
boundaries of what the song was doing. And so, he did a bunch of, improv experimental takes, and then in the studio I cut them up and kind of structured them into a thing that sounded good and engaging and entertaining, but still it was really clear real quickly that it needed something else. So we reached out to some friends of ours that do this experimental horn section thing that's just fucking amazing. They're just, stacking pedal upon pedal, and it at times you can, if you're not watching them perform it, you would think it was all synths. Right. And then every once in a while you'd hear a horn and be like, okay, that's definitely a trombone or a trumpet or some sort of brass instrument. But it usually sounds really industrial and synth driven, but it's two guys on horns with a large selection of effect pedals and
right.
devices.
Grinding it out.
Yeah. So it was funny because I reached out to them and asked if they were interested, and they said totally. And I was like, well, let me forward you what we have, and then you can get comfortable and familiar with it. But then we'll set a date and you can come to my studio and we'll have fun. And there's like no pressure, and like, we'll just explore and have fun. And, we have lots of things going on, and they had lots of things going on. And then it was like 4 months had passed, and I reached back out and I was like, you should set that date. Let's make this happen. And our friends, their group name is Disco Behemoth. And Scott was like, "Oh, I already recorded it. Fuck, I forgot to send it to you."
Oh wow, okay.
And I was like, "Oh shit, okay."
Yeah.
I was like, here's where you can upload it, and I got it, and it was 96 tracks of
oh my god
horns.
That's a lot of horns.
And what's really interesting about it is that I was like, there's no fucking way I'm gonna use all this shit. It sounds fucking phenomenal, but
sure.
So it's like they were very, it's exactly what it needed. Like, for every part that you hear, if you hear a tone or a texture, like, they would do it and then change the pitch slightly and like stack like multiple takes of it that just swelled and just like ebbed and flowed together. So it's like, if you can identify a part that they're contributing to and it sounds like one track, it's like between 5 and 10. So it was a process for me to like sort through them and identify these are all variations of like a part, and I just created subgroups and bounced them down and panned them out differently, and then stacked them, and was like, okay, so now I got like 10 parts,
right?
And even then I was like, I don't think I need all this, but I was experimenting with mixing, and pretty quickly was like, every fucking part of this is integral. Like, their contribution was so well thought out, and it's just perfect. Like, if I muted a part, it's just like, no, that's not it, and then bring it back in, I'm like, fuck, there it is. So they crushed it. And yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's an oddball, kind of out of nowhere collaboration, and a really fun track on the album. But simultaneously, I don't think we're ever going to play it live.
Right. But you kind of freed up in that way because of it, right? You're just like, it exists in the confines of the record.
Yeah. But, so it's, I recorded all of it and edited and arranged stuff after it had been, recorded. And mastering is my, that's where my gears are set. And
sure.
I fucking refuse to mix anything that I've recorded or plan to master. So we sent it to a colleague and dear friend of mine, who Robert Cheek, who mixed it, and he's such a pleasure to work with, because not only is his work just flawless, like anytime I've had mixes or projects that he's referred his clients to me, there's never any issues. There's areas where things can be enhanced, and there's absolutely work to be done, but there's never any, oh shit, they didn't catch this, I'm gonna have to get surgical, and there's never any issues.
Right.
And let's go off topic real quick. That I think people think that when something is mixed really well, that means the mastering engineer doesn't have to do much. That is so not the case. It's its own unique set of challenges, because especially when it's recorded and mixed well and written well, like you tweak an EQ boost just a quarter of a decibel, and it's like, whoa, that's a big step.
Right.
Conversely, when there's a mix that wasn't recorded in an ideal location, like there's phase issues in the room or equipment was not ideal, I'll lay on an EQ and like crank it and be like, I don't fucking hear a difference. Like, there's just
sure. Yeah.
certain mixes are very responsive to being pushed around, and other mixes are very, very rigid, and you can be very aggressive with it, and it almost feels like hardly anything changed. But back on topic, mixes I get from my friend Robert Cheek are there's never any issues, and it's always just enhancement work, and of course that takes plenty of time. But I've worked with him many, many times over the years on his clients' work that he refers to me. And it was a real fun treat to be the artist that's working with him.
Right.
In a different capacity.
Switch it up a little bit. Yeah.
And what I loved is that I remember, because it's like I do like a mix to the best of my ability, just to give him an idea of what I was envisioning, but also being like, dude, like, this is what I was thinking, but like, just fucking do what you're going to do. Like, I trust you.
Right.
And every time I've worked with him, when he sends it back, I'm usually like, that's different than what I was thinking, but so much better. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well,
and
that counts for a lot.
That's on a picky level. That's on a crazy,
sure, meticulous, I would say, but picky.
Very
sure.
meticulous. Talking about the way tones decay and cut through, but yeah, pleasure to work with. He fucking crushed it. So yeah, it's like he'll send it back, and I'm like, that's fucking amazing. And he'll be like, "Are there anything you want me to adjust?" And in my head, I'm like, I was thinking I was gonna have to give you like extensive notes on
Right.
how I want the guitar to really jump out here, but then pull back here and be bassier, more focused on the low end. Like it's like, he's intuitive. He knows he gets it. So a pleasure working and having him mix this body of work.
Good place to be. So that's the self-titled record, Bronson Arm.
Yeah. You
can get that bronsonarm.bandcamp.com. Of course, you can also go to learningcurverecords.bandcamp.com. Pick that bad boy up. It's the one that looks like it would be an Eastern European movie poster. I mean that as a compliment. Blake, it's been a pleasure, man. Glad we got to do this. Thanks for taking the time. Pleasure to talk to you about all the music.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, this was fun.
Last thing is the only canned question I ever ask on the show, and you can choose to interpret it however you like. But why do you do what you do?
There's many levels to that. I would say, on one hand, I have to be sane. If I'm not playing music, I become childlike, irritable in an unreasonable way that does not make sense to me. So being creative with music is what balances out whatever, my mental health, all that stuff. So I routinely have to make time for it to be able to function properly. Additionally, it's just one of those things that gives, maybe on a somewhat spiritual side, what makes the world make sense to me. I recall when I moved my family from Seattle out here to Michigan, I think it was just about 5 years ago, but there's obviously a period where I was not playing in a band. And then once we got settled, going out and catching a house show in our neighborhood in some random basement and connecting with the music and just that feeling that everything is making sense. And there's, not to sound too dramatic about it, but it's like there's a reason. There's a reason and a calling, and yeah. So on one side, I just really want to, and on the other side, I absolutely fucking have to stay sane.
There you go, Blake. Thanks so much, man. Appreciate having you. Take care, brother.
Good night.
There he goes. Blake Bickel, Bronson Arm. Let's hear one of these here tunes from this here record. I guess I'll say. This is Conscious Confuser. That one gets me every time. There you go, Bronson Arm. It's off the self-titled record, bronsonarm.bandcamp.com. You can get that. Also, learningcurverecords.bandcamp.com. That features Blake Bickel, who's, I hope you enjoyed hearing that talk from. Name of the show is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. Thank you so very much for listening to it. This show airs Thursdays, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific. Streaming live, YouTube and Twitch. Podcasted later everywhere. Get it anywhere you get your podcasts. ProtonicReversal.com for the archives. Always free. No ads, no sponsors. No kidding. If you like the show and you want to get episodes sooner, though, patreon.com/ProtonicReversal. $1 a month will help support the show and will achieve the goal of getting you these episodes sooner. So if you haven't already and you enjoy the show, consider doing that. Thanks to everyone sharing the show around, liking, subscribing to your platform of choice, even leaving a review. All that helps people discover the show. It's a darn nice thing to do, so it's deeply appreciated.
Signing off, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all the ships at sea.
Got that final run coming up here for the 10-year anniversary show in late April. Some great stuff coming up. Greg Norton, Huskadoo coming back. Kid Congo Powers coming up.
I've got
Ralph Spite, Victim's Family. It's going to be good.
50,000
All kinds of stuff.
watts of power.
So stay tuned for all that to the home of the Protonic Reversal. Feel free to tell a friend. Tell an enemy. Tell a friend of me. You know how this goes. What's up next? Greg Norton. Yeah, Greg Norton of Husker Du. And Ultra Bomb coming up next. So stay tuned for that.
Turn sound into electricity.
And, of course, stay safe out there, as always.
Can you hear me now?
And I'll catch you later.
Out on Route 128, you're dark and lonely. I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on Earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, got my radio